So, you gotta be a carry player, the position 1, the golden boy, the hard carry. Carry is literally the only position in the game where it's acceptable to ignore all the fights and play really selfishly in order to get your items and fight during your power spikes. So, why would you want to play carry? Other than being the biggest baby on the team with the most fragile ego imaginable, it's the independence of knowing that the game mostly rests in your hands and you don't need to depend on other players to do things for you. Sure, the game is gonna be hard as fuck if your support doesn't babysit you properly, or if you're getting ganked 24/7. But the really good players can find ways to play around that, jungle earlier, or move unpredictably on the map to make it harder to hunt you down. So, who are the usual heroes that fill this role? We can safely say that most of the time, hard carries are heroes who are weak in the early game, but scale really well in the mid to late game after getting a few items. Heroes like Drow, Juggernaut, and Slark, among many others. At least until some TI winner picks a really weird pick, like Ayo hard carry. Yes, I'm looking at you, Ana. I had to deal with wannabe Anas in my game for weeks after TI8. Fuck you, Ana. But putting that aside, where does the carry go when the game starts? The carry goes to the safe lane. The lanes are organized unlike League, where there's just top, middle, and bottom. The lanes are instead asymmetrical, with both sides having their respective off lane, mid lane, and safe lane. But why is it called the safe lane? It's called the safe lane because the creeps meet way closer to your friendly tower than the enemy tower, which makes it much easier to retreat if the enemy ganks or harasses you. Here's a quick overview on how to play the laning phase. The first thing you need to know is lane equilibrium. If your lane is pushed out near the enemy tower, it makes farming way riskier, since the enemy can harass the shit out of you before you get a chance to retreat back to your friendly tower. But how would you control the lane equilibrium? You would usually ask your support to pull the damn small camp. Also, do not auto attack, as that naturally pushes your lane nearer to the enemy's tower. You want to slowly control and maintain the positioning of where the creeps meet so that it is closer to your tower, but not close enough to where it's under fire from your tower. If the enemy creeps start getting hit by your tower, it will cause the tower to bounce back the lane towards the enemy tower. How you play a lane also greatly depends on the character that you use to play it. Let's say if you're playing an aggressive safe laner like Slark, you would usually play together with your support to harass and posture aggressively, making sure that the enemy offlaner cannot get free last hits. You would always punish the enemy for being out of position, but this is something you'll get a feel for over time playing, or by watching better players. If you're playing a passive safe laner like Spectre for instance, you'd instead prioritize getting last hits without taking too much damage from the enemy offlaner. You will have to abuse creep aggroing to make sure that you can maintain creep equilibrium, because unlike in our previous example, passive safe laners don't have the tools to harass or take advantage of enemy misplays, unless it's a next level throw from the enemy. You would usually ask your support to stack and pull the wave so that your creep wave dies to the small camp and you can safely farm under the tower most of the time. But no matter what, there will always be a scenario where either you or your support have fucked up and died a couple times in lane. This is the one situation that you will always want to avoid. You will need to decide for yourself if the lane is deemed unsafe, in which case you want to say, fuck the lane, I'ma head out, and proceed to go farm the jungle and only return to defend your tower. Sometimes the enemy is so strong that you might even have to leave entirely, giving up your tower early if they can dive under your tower and punish you for defending it. Just remember, farming a little bit is better than dying and farming nothing. Take the most you can get, but not at the cost of your life. So, what do carries do most of the time? From minute 1 to 15 to 20, you're expected to farm. Team is fighting in your offlane? Farm. Enemies came to gank you in the safe lane? TP to your offlane and farm. Your support is dying? Sorry bruh, but I gotta go and farm. Of course, there are exceptions, but generally, you're expected to farm your ass off until you get your items. You are expected to do this because carries usually come online at about 15 to 20 minutes. So assuming your team didn't feed their asses trying to buy you enough space to farm, by then you should be able to join and greatly affect the outcome of team fights. The exception to this rule are carries with strong ultimates. Heroes like Juggernaut with Omnislash or Void with Chronosphere are expected to join a fight whenever their ultimate is off cooldown. Then rinse and repeat farming until their ults back up. So yeah, the recipe to winning as a position 1 is basically to farm until you get 1 or 2 big items, then join fights at your discretion. By winning these fights, they should give you enough space to push towers or secure other objectives. And then I don't know what you do. Until you finally reach the enemy ancient and destroy it. So, all this talk about needing to farm, but how the fuck would you actually go about farming? You gotta keep 2 things in mind at all times when you're deciding on your farming pattern. Lane creeps are always worth more than jungle creeps, and ancient creeps are worth more than normal jungle creeps. So, how does knowing these 2 things affect how well we will farm? Well, since we know that the lane creeps are worth more than the jungle creeps, you'd always prioritize farming the lane creeps, but only if it's safe enough for you to do so. If you see the entire enemy team missing, and it's too early for them to be doing Roshan, you can bet your ass they're coming to fuck you up in your lane. So, back to lane creeps. You'll always want to prioritize farming these first, since they are usually the easiest to farm in the early game. Since they have less HP and hurt way less than farming the jungle early game. Also, creep aggro is another mechanic that is literally your best friend when it comes to securing the 3 melee creeps. And you can either use an ability to secure the range creep or ask your support to secure it for you, so at least you get the XP. But what's creep aggro? Creep aggro is when you right click the enemy and the creeps will come follow you for a set distance. This is a massive oversimplification, but it will do for now. You'd also want to ask your support to stack and pull the wave so that you can safely farm the wave under your own tower, and if they refuse to do so, it's worth it most of the time to go and do a single pull by yourself, just to make farming a little bit easier. Then, once you're at a point where you can clear the waves quickly, and have some spare time before the next wave of creeps, you'll want to add on a quick jungle camp, either the medium camp over here, or the small camp over here. Do whichever camp you can. It's completely not worth it losing half your health for the 2 medium camps. If that's the case, you just want to do the small camp, or even better, pull the camp and farm it yourself. Remember rule 2, the fact that ancient creeps are worth more than jungle creeps? At a certain point in the game, you'll be able to farm the ancient camp efficiently. In which case, the triangle, found over here in the map, becomes insanely valuable to you and your farming pattern. Carries would usually go to the triangle and start clearing the off-lane's lane creeps, and then supplementing that with the ancient camp and the large camp in the triangle. This farming pattern is what's considered optimal once you get your farming item, usually being a Maelstrom or a Battle Fury depending on what hero you play. Well, that pretty much sums up how to farm, which is the meat and potatoes of what makes a good carry, well, good. But now that we've covered farming, when should you start fighting rather than farming? I said about 15 to 20 minutes into the game earlier as a benchmark, but it really depends on your character and what item build you plan to use. When you start fighting as a gyrocopter, maxing your Q, Rocket Barrage, will drastically differ than if you were to max your E, Flat Cannon. Because Rocket Barrage is really good for fighting early on with insane magic damage, whereas Flat Cannon is insanely good for flash farming lane and jungle creeps in the early game. When you fight is also dependent on your item timings. Usually, as an anti-mage for example, you'd want to farm your Battle Fury by 15 minutes. But even with a Battle Fury, you'll find it pretty hard to fight. So since you need to farm your farming item first, which is your Battle Fury, you'd want to farm up your Manta style, which is your first big item after. You would usually do this by the 20th minute and start joining fights then if you can. This is something you get a feel for when you start getting used to a hero. I'd recommend spamming a pool of 3 heroes in case 1 or 2 of them get banned, and practicing them until you get a feel for which levels and items make the power spikes feel apparent. So that's pretty much all you need to know to get started as a carry in Dota. Like the video if it helped you out, and thanks for watching.